I'm going to start this Titanfall 2 video with a question. What's better than having one of the best missions in any first-person shooter featured in your campaign? Well, how about having two? Time-travelling masterpiece Effect and Cause is deservedly described by many as not only one of the best missions in Titanfall 2, but in any first-person shooter. But I've heard far fewer people talk about the Beacon, the mission which follows immediately after. And they really should be talking about it, because while it may not share quite the same sense of spectacle as Effect and Cause, what it does have in common is that it is also one of the best designed levels in any shooter I've ever played. So let's not waste any more time and take a look at why. The Beacon begins with Cooper and his Titan BT-7274 heading towards an interstellar beacon with the goal of sending a distress signal to Militia Command. During the previous mission Effect and Cause, Cooper and BT discovered that their sworn enemies, the Interstellar Manufacturing Corporation, or IMC for short, had been building a mysterious superweapon known as the Fold Weapon, which they planned to use to destroy the militia homeworld of Harmony. The stakes heading into this mission then are incredibly high. If Cooper and BT succeed, then the militia might just have a chance of averting catastrophe, but fail, and as BT says, 40 million lives could well be lost.
And if we don't get over there in time?
40 million souls on the planet Harmony will be lost. We must get this information to SRS Commander Sarah Briggs.
On the whole, I'd say the Beacon's opening few minutes are perhaps its least exciting, although I do like the area filled with toxic smog. Forcing you to use BT to progress serves to remind you that Cooper and BT are ultimately a team, and that you'll need BT's help if you're to succeed. This is something some may have forgotten following Effect and Cause, during which Cooper spent a fair bit of time alone, and he'll soon be separated from BT for a time again in the substation. So, I think using the level design here to help remind you early on that the pair are stronger together is a wise decision. It's also worth noting that I think the Beacon is the mission which really begins to show how much Cooper and BT's partnership has developed over the course of the game so far, in both personal and professional terms. This is just the first example of many, and I'll point more of them out as we go along. After a fairly run-of-the-mill encounter clearing stalkers to rescue a militia squad, Cooper and BT are given their next objective.
The power is shut down. We've lost all control of the beacon. We need something like this to jumpstart the system, but this one's destroyed.
And arriving at the substation, things begin to get rather more exciting. In my video covering Effect and Cause, which you can watch by clicking the card on screen now, I spoke a lot about what a great job Respawn did of slowly introducing players to the time travel mechanic. It was introduced in-world and in a way which made sense, with the mission ramping up its complexity over time at a near perfect pace. The Beacon doesn't feature time travel, but it does again demonstrate Respawn's mastery of introducing you to new mechanics in ways which make sense in-world. First up, you're tasked with tackling a wall running sequence to cross a gap, but with the added danger of electrocutions should you time your jumps between the walls incorrectly. Respawn then makes you do it a second time immediately after, just to make sure you've got the hang of it, before then throwing you into a fairly run-of-the-mill firefight. Having already made sure you were able to dodge hazards by jumping from wall to wall, the difficulty then increases. This time, you not only have to think about the horizontal, but also the vertical. Your jumps still need to be timed well enough to move you from wall to wall, but to avoid the hazards, you now need to think about how high you jump as well. And much like the first challenge, Respawn again checks you know what you're doing by making you do it twice in quick succession before allowing you to move on. After turning off a turbine and heading down a hole, you'll soon get your hands on the arc tool. Watching this robot use the tool just moments prior should be enough of a hint as to how it functions, and objects the tool can be used on also come with a clear visual indicator to make the mechanic as easy to understand as possible. You can use the tool to interact with objects with green lights, at which point the lights will turn red and they then can't be used again until they turn back to green. Green for go, red for stop. Easy peasy. Much like the two previous examples involving jumping I mentioned earlier, you're then tasked with using the arc tool several times in quick succession to help you quickly get used to the new mechanic. First you have to turn off a turbine with the tool to progress, then use it to open a door, and finally to zap another turbine to turn it back on. I've no idea whether Respawn actually had this in mind, but it feels to me like there are two distinct sections to this area once you've picked up the arc tool, both of which are designed to get you thinking about how it can be used, before you later get the chance to have some fun with it in far more open areas. Its first few uses demonstrate how it can be used to help you navigate the environment, for example by opening a door or switching on a turbine. This is important as you'll later be able to use the tool to open up new paths to get the drop on your enemies, and these first few uses help associate the arc tool with navigating environments. The second section focuses on using the tool to raise heat sinks, which you can then move behind to shield yourself from turbines and safely move forwards. This one's a bit more abstract as there aren't turbines to contend with when the beacon opens up later on, but I do wonder whether this section is designed to get you thinking about the arc tool's applications in terms of combat. The heat sinks are essentially cover, the turbine takes the place of enemies firing at you, and these parts as a whole show you that the tool can not only be used for movement, but to give you a tactical advantage over your enemies as well. At the end of it all, there's a really fast wall running segment which I don't think serves a greater purpose, but is awesome nonetheless, followed by one final challenge which brings together everything you've experienced so far. You have to be able to jump from wall to wall while controlling the height of your jumps, putting the skills you honed at the start of the area into practice, and you also have to use the arc tool again to help clear a path, but at a far quicker pace than had previously been required. And that is the end of what I'd call the beacon's tutorial area. First you practiced your wall running, then you learned how to use the arc tool, and finally you put them both together. I know it may not seem like anything too exciting, but I'll say again here that the way Respawn uses its levels to teach you new mechanics is fantastic. Many games would transport you to a separate training area or bombard you with tutorial messages, or maybe even both, but Respawn instead gradually ramps up the challenge over time within the mission, which makes the Titanfall 2 learning experience a far more satisfying one. It mostly trusts you to figure things out for yourself, it treats you like an adult, and the game is ultimately far better for it. After powering up the beacon, it quickly becomes clear that there's more work to be done, with the beacon's targeting module offline. It's the classic princess is in another castle trope, which I have to be honest and say I'm not a huge fan of, but it does later give you a reason to climb to the top of the beacon, which is rather fun, so all's well that ends well I suppose. The beacon slows its pace here for a few minutes ahead of the next major section, during which you get another moment that demonstrates how BT and Cooper's relationship is continuing to blossom.
My scans detect a functioning uplink targeting module, 428 meters northeast. My analysis indicates a throw is our only option here. I can throw you across the gap.
Are you sure about this?
There is a 68% chance of success.
What about the other 32%?
There is a 32% chance of an incomplete traversal, resulting in catastrophic trauma, massive internal bleeding, and multiple compound fractures. Dismemberment may also occur. There is also the possibility of electrocution and disintegration within the toxic fog below.
I'm a big fan of this exchange. It's well written, it's genuinely funny, and it's also a direct callback to a conversation the two had during Effect and Cause.
Nice. Maybe next time you can throw me.
Noted.
Throughout much of Titanfall 2 up until this point, it's BT giving Cooper advice on how to progress, but here we instead see BT putting one of Cooper's suggestions into action. It's a lovely reversal of the dynamic between the two, which helps clearly indicate that BT is beginning to really believe in Cooper as a pilot. After using cranes to move platforms into positions where you can then use them to wall run to the next section, you arrive at what I consider to be one of the best battles in the entirety of Titanfall 2. Here, the game's fast-paced gunplay, level design which encourages quick movement, and the arc tool all come together to create an absolutely fantastic encounter. The sheer breadth of options you're given during this fight is impressive, to put it lightly. Respawn were the ones who created the template for how a Call of Duty style arena should be structured in a shooter, back when they were known as Infinity Ward and helmed the Call of Duty series, so it's no surprise to here see them take that established formula and continue to build on it. Let's take a quick look at the options available to you during this encounter. The fight begins in a more narrow area where you can take the direct route on foot or use the arc tool to open up a separate path, both of which lead to an area housing a pair of stalkers, which the arc tool can also be used on to get them to fight alongside you. Progressing to the larger arena, the arc tool can then be used to open a lower route in addition to the higher path already available, both of which lead to an elevator the arc tool can raise or lower, with the higher path then leading to a vantage point and the enormous Thunderbolt weapon. Continuing forwards, the arc tool can be used in the central area to bring stalkers into the fight, and it can also help open avenues of attack on the right and in the middle. If you don't fancy either of those, then you can instead use the route on the left side to attack from a different angle, or even use your movement skills to do a bit of climbing and bound across the building's rooftops. I don't think anyone would try to argue that it's the most complex FPS encounter ever created, but what it does give you over other similar titles is choices. Choices enabled through Respawn's philosophy of designing Titanfall 2's levels around the game's movement mechanics and any other options available at the time, such as the arc tool in the beacon, or indeed time travel in Effect and Cause. After making use of a few more cranes and fighting through several more waves of enemies, you arrive at the dish which houses a replacement targeting module. Once the dish has been moved to make it easier to access, you're assaulted by another wave of enemies, and for me this encounter is a little disappointing. The other major battle I've just talked about presented you with so many options for how to tackle things, but this firefight feels limited in comparison, with very few uses for the arc tool on offer. What I loved about Effect & Cause's time travel mechanic was that it was used the perfect amount and Respawn never risked it losing its impact by using it too much. The arc tool will be used a few more times during the beacon, but I've got to be honest, in terms of combat, I actually don't think it's used enough. The encounter I ran through earlier is so good, I really think Respawn should have included a couple more similar battles before this area reached its end. But end it does, with Cooper taking the targeting module and beginning to work his way back to BT. A thoroughly entertaining final test of your platforming and arc tool skills awaits, and I'd say again that this section could have been a little longer given how entertaining it is. That being said, keeping these segments on the short side does help keep the beacon's pace high throughout, and given it's already one of the campaign's longer levels, that may have perhaps been a good thing in terms of keeping you engaged. Reuniting with BT, you take out another group of enemies before Titanfall 2 again continues to hammer home just how much Cooper and BT trust each other.
How are you, BT?
Damage report. Critical systems are functioning properly. And despite your self-evaluation, I'm certain Captain Lastimosa would have said you fought well, Cooper.
Thanks.
Followed by another throw and a brief climb to the dish where Cooper inserts the new module. Cooper then falls from the dish and is saved in the nick of time by BT, and I love the animation of BT struggling but eventually succeeding to reciprocate Cooper's thumbs up. After taking on some Reapers followed by a few Titans, it's time to face the beacon's boss, Richter, and I don't love it, or to be honest, any of the other boss battles with the Apex Predators scattered throughout Titanfall 2's campaign. I understand why Respawn included them. They act almost as training battles, giving you a chance to face off against the different classes of Titan to prepare you for hopping online and dueling with other players. Unfortunately, however, they're usually fairly easy and not particularly engaging. In other games, bosses are often used to add a crescendo to the end of a level, to add that final layer of excitement, but Titanfall 2's campaign is so fast-paced and so consistently engaging throughout that I honestly don't think anything would be lost if the boss battles were removed entirely. Other games use bosses to get your pulse racing just that little bit quicker, but in Titanfall 2, it's already racing to begin with. With Richter blown to smithereens, the beacon online and the distress signal sent, you reach the end of the beacon. There's a final scene here between Cooper, BT and Commander Briggs.
Wait a minute. Lastimosa linked you to a rifleman?
Yes, he had no other options.
Understood. We'll get you transferred to a fully qualified pilot.
Objection. Cooper is my pilot. Our combat effectiveness rating now exceeds 90%. Request permission to retain this link.
You're lucky our backs are up against the wall, BT. Permission granted. That's high praise coming from a machine, Cooper.
Given the numerous examples of Cooper and BT working together brilliantly during the beacon, BT requesting to stay linked to Cooper won't have come as too much of a surprise to anyone, but having him state his desire to continue working alongside Cooper puts a nice full stop on everything which came before, not just in this mission, but during the campaign as a whole. Everything up to this point was about Cooper and BT building their relationship, and now that trust has been established, they're really ready to show what they can accomplish together. To conclude, I think the best praise that I can give the beacon is that even though it's one of Titanfall 2's longer missions, clocking in at around 35 to 40 minutes, it never begins to drag. It introduces you to a new mechanic, teaches you how to use it, and then asks you to put what you've learned into practice. And even if that was all it did, that still probably would have been enough to cement it as one of, if not the best, missions Titanfall 2 has to offer. However, the beacon also throws in a host of brilliant moments between Cooper and BT during quieter times, giving it that extra splash of heart which makes it incredibly engaging not just from a gameplay perspective, but from a narrative one as well. As I mentioned during the introduction, Effect & Cause will likely always be the Titanfall 2 mission people point to first when they talk about the game, which is a bit of a shame as I think the beacon should also be remembered as one of the best, most engaging levels in any first-person shooter. Thanks for watching the video, boys, girls and pilots. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, do consider liking, commenting and subscribing if so, as there's plenty more to come, including more Titanfall 2 content, and it really helps the channel. And hopefully, I'll catch you all again soon.